And I hope all of you are healthy. I hope you all had beautiful Chagim, and B'ezras Hashem, we're here to start the new year. We were, according to my notes here, we are in the second parak of Hilchot Teshuva on Halacha Zayin. Should we begin from there, or do you want to go back and redo from the beginning of this parak? I'm ready to begin from Halacha Zayin, which I think we have a lot to talk about. Okay, and I don't know whether there were, because I brought another copy of that particular book, which is the Rambam text and also a translation, the one that's standing right next to Hanoch on the table. So I don't know. One for the road.
No, it's for you also. One for you also.
So just a very quick revisit of the first, the very first halacha that we have here, where the Rambam is very, very careful in his use of language. And just to remind us, he starts off saying that all the mitzvahs in the Torah, im avar adam al achat mehen. So he says, if a person transgresses. And then he quotes a pasuk that says, ish o isha ki ya'asu mikol chatot ha'adam. So the difference that I focus on is between the Rambam's use of the word im and the pasuk, the Torah's use of the word ki. The Torah is telling us when a person will sin. It doesn't say it might or might not happen. The Torah says this is what happens when you sin. This is what you're supposed to do when you sin. You're supposed to say vidui, and you're supposed to go through the whole process of Teshuvah. Rambam, I think, is offering us his, he's a brilliant, in addition to his many other gifts and talents, he's a brilliant psychologist. He understands human nature. So he's saying, if you sin, which is kind of like saying, this might not apply to you, right? So it's a very important principle for teachers, for rabbis. There's a halacha that we're supposed to give tochacha. We're supposed to tell people when they're doing wrong, and we're supposed to straighten them out. But we're also not supposed to give them tochacha if we know that they're going to ignore it, if we know they're going to reject it. On the other side, there's a halacha that we're supposed to accept tochacha. Fine. We'll get to that in here as well, B'ezras Hashem. But we can't rely on, so I'm going to give you two levels of tochacha now. I'm going to say, what you're doing is wrong. And you're going to say, who are you to tell me what I'm doing is wrong? And I'm going to say, you're also supposed to accept it when I tell you that what you're doing is wrong. So
but you're supposed to tell the person in a very nice...
so this is what I'm saying, exactly. So what I'm saying is that Rambam, it's as a rabbi, for example, when you see somebody doing something that you think they should be doing differently. So there's something that I see sometimes when I go to morning minyan. Sometimes there'll be a guy with his tefillin shalosh, like in the middle of his forehead, right? So midoraita is supposed to be above the hairline. And in fact, if you wear it in the middle of your forehead, that's like the way that, other people wear it. Right? That's the way the Karaites wear it, because they say "Lutotafot bein einecha," and their shita is bein einecha, right? So it's not just it's a mistake, but it's a mistake that, in a historical context, has other implications that the person wearing it that way probably is not aware of. So instead of going over to the person and saying, you're wearing a tefillin wrong, where he may have been doing it that way for the last, 3 or 30 or 70 years or what have you, right? The next time you have an opportunity to address the proper positioning of the tefillin, you say it to the group. And that way the guy who's wearing it wrong might say, nobody ever told me that. So I've had occasion where, not exactly with that particular practice, but I've had occasion where, God gave me the right guidance to not say something face to face to somebody, but to say it in a large group in a different moment, in a different setting, and afterwards have somebody come over to me and say, I want to thank you for teaching that halacha that you taught today, because I never knew that. And whereas if you go to somebody and say, you know you're doing it wrong, it's not likely to get you the kind of response that you're hoping for. So I think Rambam is telling us, this might not apply to you. I know, me, when I sin, this is what I do. Maybe, so it might not apply to you. But, it's good to learn halachas. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, because the earth has a strong gravity, yeah?
Yeah.
So my feeling, even I know the halakha and I do it properly how it has to be done, but because of gravity, it's sliding down, and then you shake a little bit, not very much, but a little bit like a candle, and you go up and down and move around, and that's the feeling, that's what happens to me all the time. They start slide down. And sometimes people tell me it's too much. I try to correct it all the time.
Can I make a
So
suggestion?
it's not that you don't know how that is. It's just gravity. So
Right, but maybe either your tefillin strap
I changed
it's too
it
loose.
many times and I have it.
So maybe you need to either adjust it, or maybe you need to adjust your head. I don't know.
No, but it's moving.
What you have to do,
Going
what you have to
No.
do, Rabbi, so what you have to do is you gotta get a thumbtack and just push.
There you go. A simple solution. So, and throughout this also, it's very important to understand and to keep reminding ourselves that Rambam is not, making things up and saying, I want you to do it this way. Rambam is, his whole approach in all of Mishneh Torah is to say, I know this stuff because I spent my life learning it and I really know it very well. And I'm going to give you a prescriptive list of how to observe the halachas. And this is actually, this is the forerunner to what then became Shulchan Aruch, for example, and this is the first real codification of the laws. And so now we're in the second parak, where he's talking about the laws of Yom Kippur. Wonderful, thank you. Halacha Zayin, Yom HaKippurim, Hu Zman Teshuva Lakol. Yom Kippur is a time for Teshuva for everybody.
What page are you on?
Well, I'm not on here. I'm not in that book. I'm in chapter. Thank you. Chapter 2.
Chapter 2?
Hilchot. Which direction does this go? Rabim. Teshuva. Chapter 2. Here we go. Page 624 here, number 7. Okay. Yom Kippurim hu zman teshuva lakol. It's a time for teshuva for everybody. Li'achid u'lerabim, for individuals and for the community. V'hu ketz mechila u'slicha l'Yisrael. It's like the ultimate time of mechila and slicha for the Jewish people. Lefichach chayvim hakol la'asot teshuva u'litvadot bayom hakippurim. Everybody, therefore, is obligated to do teshuva and to say vidui, to say the formula of the confession on Yom Kippur. And we saw that the formula of the confession is Ana Hashem Chatati Aviti Pashati V'asiti Kach V'kach. Oh, please God, I sinned, I transgressed, Pashati, anyway, I did bad stuff. And I did this and I did, and so we have to specify the specific sins that we're talking about. Mitzvat vidui Yom HaKippurim שיתחיל מערב היום, קודם שאכל.
Oh, before the
Interesting.
final meal?
So the mitzvah, so the vidui of Yom Kippur begins before the mafsaket, right? Remember, the nosach of Mincha, Erev Yom Kippur, has the vidui in it, right? You say the regular Mincha prayer, and then you say the whole thing, Ana Hashem Chatati Aviti Pashati, Al Chet, Al Chet, Al Chet, right? And why do you do it before you eat?
Because it's in case you could choke.
It says right here, right? Shema Yichanek b'siudat kodem shitvadeh. They might drop dead, halila, before you get a chance to say vidui, right? You would think, by the way, so this is right from the Gemara. It's not like he's making stuff up, right? He says in his one of his letters, I believe, about Mishneh Torah, he says, basically, it's like they say on television. This is all the halacha you'll ever need, right? right? It's like, read my sefer. All the halacha you'll ever need to be a good Jew. And it's what he says. He says that he said people make a mistake by sitting and learning Gemara all day because, and it sounds very radical, but if you think about it, Rambam knows what he's talking about. He says the way the Gemara is taught, you came down through institutions as in the history of Machloket. And so many people think that the purpose of learning Torah is Machloket. He says the purpose of Machloket is clarity. But people instead say, well, I'm going to have a different argument and I'm going to get into a fight with you over this, and that's going to make me, what, a better Jew, more holy, more righteous? But people take sides, and we see it all throughout, going back to Hillel v'Shammai, and before that Shammai v'Avtalion, right? So they start arguing, and from Shammai, in the time of Shammai and Hillel, Machloket enters the discourse and becomes part of the mainstream of how Torah is taught and learned and passed down from generation to generation. Rambam says, that's all well and good if you want to just sit there and have a theoretical discussion about it. But what we need is to know, b'maseh, how do we go through our lives as good Jews? He said, so I peeled through all the machlokot. Here's the essence. I distilled it down to the essence. You read my book, it'll tell you exactly how to practice, how to live your life in order to be a good Jew.
Rabbi?
Please.
So in Bereshit, we have Adam and Eve, they were warned what not to do. But how does Cain know that he was committing a sin?
I disagree with two parts of the statement you just made. Adam and Eve were not warned what not to do. Adam was warned what not to do. Eve was not warned.
Weren't they told not to eat from the...
Adam was told not to eat. Chava was not told not to eat. God doesn't say to Chava, don't eat from the tree. And you read my book? Go back to the chapter on Bereshit, right? Cain, before he kills his brother, does not have an awareness of that being an evil act, or a prohibited act. After the fact, I think he becomes aware of it, and partly because it's irreversible, which is something that he has, I think, that he's not aware of before the fact, and also because he sees how God reacts. And he says, I didn't know you were going to get that upset about it, right? There are two ways of reading the famous pasuk, Hashoma Achi Anochi, right? God says to Cain, Hevel Achicha, where is Hevel, your brother? And the pasuk says, Lo Yadati Hashoma Achi Anochi. And the way we usually translate it is, I don't know, what, am I supposed to take care of him or something? Right? But another perfectly legitimate way to read it, which is what I write in my book, so I encourage those of you who have it to please take a look, is Lo yadati Hashem achi anochi. I never knew I was supposed to take care of my brother. God, you didn't tell me that. And we know because I think with the text, I would say we know, the text supports that because in the second creation after the flood, God takes Noach out and starts giving Noach a bunch of new commandments. And one of the very first things that God tells Noach, watch this coming up next week, here coming attractions, spoiler alert, God tells Noach, do not murder people. Right? That if you kill somebody, then you're going to be executed for it. God didn't tell that to the first people. So, but yes, you're right, like Cain and Hevel and Adam and Chava did not have Rambam to tell them how to behave. Right? That's true. But it's my own little, I'm sorry for like a sidebar here, it's my own little take on, now I'm starting to like try to read my way through Ramban. And the way he talks about after eating the fruit, and this is kind of my spinning off from Ramban's observations. because he says that the awareness that Adam had when God spoke with him was not like the awareness, the shocking awareness of the experience of Nevuah, of the prophetic experience, right? And I think, what that implies to me, what that says to me is that Nevuah, prophecy, comes into the world as a result of eating the fruit. They were naked and they didn't know it. They were naked and it didn't make any difference because there was no barrier between them and God. There was no barrier between, they all just lived in full reality. Adam and Chava lived in reality. They lived with the trees and the plants and the animals, and they ate the fruits, and they lived their lives in the Gan. And God was just like part of the atmosphere. It was part of their overall mitzvah, part of the reality that they lived in. When they ate the fruit, what's the first thing that happens? They become aware that they're naked. It means that now there's a barrier. It means that now there's a distinct self-awareness, and once there's a self-awareness, it's an awareness. It's also an awareness of the, let's call it the otherness of everything else. And once there's a barrier, you no longer have that direct communication with God. That's why he goes and he hides, and God says, Ayeka, I'm looking for you. And he says, I was hiding because I was naked. It's like all of a sudden, he can no longer stand in the presence of God. Because partly maybe because now he's aware that there is a distinction between them. It's kind of like the image of the mother and the infant, right? Mother nursing the infant, they're like a unit. And at a certain point, the infant gets self-awareness. And then the mother is somebody that comes and goes into the infant's frame of awareness. Anyway, sorry. Let's try to, I actually have wanted to try to finish this parak today, much as I love hearing myself talking, much as I love the input that I get from all of you gentlemen. And I also want to ask a question about Yom Kippur. So Afal Pi She'Vada Kodem She'Ocha, I hope that was at least somewhat useful in response to what you were talking about.
Well, it doesn't really answer the question of how someone who didn't know what he was doing for obvious reasons becomes aware of it after the fact. But part of making teshuva is to be aware.
Right, and the rabbis tell us, and the Midrash tells us very distinctly that Cain does teshuva.
Yeah.
Right.
So introduces it to the world.
Right, and so again, this is something that it's a theme throughout my book, which is the impossibility of God communicating everything to humans all at once, so that we have everything in the same kind of level of awareness that we attribute to God. Right? We attribute to God this constant, immediate, present awareness of everything, such that God cannot be confused between, was that a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? Or God cannot say, I didn't think of that. Although the Torah itself has God saying, I wish I hadn't done that. Watch what happens this coming week. God looks at Noach and says, you know what? I made a mistake. I shouldn't have created the world in the first place, right? I regret. Okay. And so it's a the consequence of creation is that your creation takes on a life of its own. And I think in large measure, the Torah is a struggle of God trying to get us to do God's plan, and us either trying to understand God's plan or trying to assert our own plan and saying, I don't want you to tell me what to do. And so even though a person, even though you said to the vidui before you ate, חוזר ומתוודה בליל יום הכיפורים ערבית, וחוזר ומתוודה בשחרית, ומוסף, ובמנחה ובנעילה. והיכן מתוודה? יחיד אחר תפילתו, ושליח ציבור באמצע תפילתו בברכה רביעית. So it's just like laying out the nusach about when, at what point in the tefillot we say the vidui, right? הווידוי שנהגו בו כל ישראל, אבל אנחנו חטאנו, and so on and so forth, right? The text of the vidui, right? והוא עיקר הווידוי. This is the focus, this is the core of the vidui. עבירות שהתוודה עליהן ביום הכיפורים זה, חוזר ומתוודה עליהן ביום הכיפורים אחר. So the sins that that we just confessed this past Yom Kippur, save them up, because we have to confess them again next Yom Kippur. What? Even if you did complete teshuvah, as he described before, teshuvah gemora, שנאמר, כי פשעי אני אדע, וחטאתי נגדי תמיד. David HaMelech says, I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. And I think it's just a very simple acknowledgement of how human beings operate. Again, this is the Rambam, being the great student of human nature that he is, right? This is the way we operate. We do something, we feel bad about it, we apologize, or we say, oh, I'm going to do teshuvah, chatati, and then we get over it. Or, as the Gemara says, there are certain sins that if you do it enough times, the Gemara says if a person does a transgression enough times, it becomes his halacha, right? So it's not just that I did it a second, it wasn't so bad. I did a third, it wasn't so bad. It's like as I didn't grow up at all in a from household, as I've mentioned before. I grew up in a totally anti-religious household. Came to this in my 20s, right? But people that I know who grew up in from yeshivas, right? They said, well, we did this, and guess what? Lightning didn't strike. Well, lightning striking, that's not like, excuse my saying it, it's part of the way that Judaism in America has become very Christian. It's like, no, lightning doesn't strike. And that's the problem. Halavai lightning should strike, so we would know when we were doing something wrong, right? We have responsibility for ourselves, and we have responsibility for paying attention to our behavior, paying attention to each other's behavior, paying attention to each other's needs. The Torah is not about what are my rights, it's about what are my obligations, and our obligations start with the attention to detail. Gabriel, please.
The English, I don't understand. Lighting a strike.
Blitz.
A blitz, yeah.
Lightning strikes.
So what's the question? What's the case? What's the question?
The question is, when, if a person does a sin, right?
Yeah.
Then God kills them with lightning.
Yeah.
Right? So a person said, well, I did this and lightning didn't strike. No?
No.
There was not an earthquake and the ground didn't open up and swallow you.
There was no, right? God didn't react.
Ah.
Huh? Right? So, yeah? Make sense?
כן.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. אין התשובה ולא יום הכיפורים מכפרין אלא על עבירות שבין אדם למקום. Tshuva and Yom Kippur only get us off the hook for sins between humans and God. כגון מי שאכל דבר אסור או בעל בעילה אסורה דחיוס בהם. So we're going to put aside the question of the social reality of Be'ila Asura, but the Rambam and Chazal view this as first and foremost a sin against the Torah. And whatever, we can talk about personalities and human interactions at another time, which is all very important. And by the way, I think Rambam is among the rabbis who get a real bum rap about his attitude towards women. But anyway. But sins between human beings, כגון החובל בחברו, somebody who does bodily harm to a person, מקלל חברו, a person who curses out or makes light of somebody else, גוזלו וכיוצא בהם, or steals from him, אינו נמחל לעולם עד שייתן לחברו מה שהוא חייב לו וירצהו. It's not enough to just pay them back the money that you stole from them. You have to also get them to forgive you. אף על פי שהחזיר לו ממון שהוא חייב לו, צריך לרצותו ולשאול ממנו שימחל לו. Even though you paid the person back, you also have to get them to give you personal forgiveness. אפילו לא הקטין את חברו אלא בדברים, צריך לפייסו. Even if you only injured another person by your speaking. Call somebody a name, insulted somebody in public. You are required to. Shana Tova, good to see you.
Shana Tova, good to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. I missed it. So you have to צריך לפייסו ולפגוע בו עד שימחל לו. You have to pester them until they forgive you. לא רצה חברו למחול לו, מביא לו שורה של 3 בני אדם, מרעיו ופגעין בו ומבקשין ממנו. So a person doesn't want to forgive us, we have to bring a beit din, basically. 3 people from the local, 3 of our, let's say a majority of our peers, kind of, right? And they have to go and ask the person forgiveness and pester them for forgiveness. לא נתחצה להם, and if the person still doesn't want to forgive us, מביא לו שנייה ושלישית. We have to come back 3 times with the beit din, with 3 different members of the beit din each time, right? So I brought, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and in front of Reuven and Shimon and Levi, I beg you to forgive me, and you say, no, nothing doing. I said, well, I guess Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, maybe you don't respect them enough. So, etc., 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 right? You have to use up your relationship with the 9 leading members of your chavra in front of this person. לא רצה מניח לא רצה מניחו והולך לו. And if a person still after the 3rd time doesn't want to forgive you, you're done. You can go. זה שלא מחל הוא החוטא. And a person who does not forgive, he's the sinner now. ואם היה רבו הולך ובא אפילו 1000 פעמים עד שימחל לו. But if it's your Rav, you go even 1,000 times. Meaning 3,000 different guys you're going to bring with you, right? So this is a very small little expression that he uses here, and it's the only time that he mentions it in the whole Sefer. He says, לא רצה מניחו והולך לו וזה שלא מחל הוא החוטא. And a person who then does not forgive, he's the sinner. I want to suggest that in many, many cases, it's going to be much more difficult to forgive than to ask for forgiveness, right? We all know what happens when Yosef is in prison, right? And the Sarah Mashkim comes to Paro. And what does he say? Et chatai ani maskir hayom. I'm going to remind you of my sin today, right? So this sin happened 2 years ago. He was in prison, right? Yosef told him, don't worry, your dream is good, you'll get out. Gets out, right? Now he's back in Paro's good graces. Why would he want to remind Paro of how angry Paro was at him that Paro almost had him killed? Because in order to tell the story, he has to recreate the situation. He has to remind Paro of how he came to that situation, right? Somebody does something wrong to us, an insult, steal money, they do damage to our property, whatever, it's another member of the community. I'm not talking about like some random insane person who comes by and throws a rock through your window, right? But somebody you see in shul every day. They cheated you in a business deal, or you feel like they did, or whatever. Time goes by, many, if not most, of these kind of social problems, they're going to revolve around ultimately not very large, very meaningful amounts of money, right? And God forbid, they didn't take so much money that they ruined your life, that you can't put food on your table, that you had to sell your house, right? They didn't ruin your marriage, they didn't destroy your family. But they now, bad taste in my mouth over this. The guy's promised me this and it didn't come through, whatever. And then, a few months go by, I see him in Minyan every day, I'm going to try to think well of my fellow Jew, not bad, before I put on the talit every morning, I have to try to, give them the benefit of the doubt.
So the Rabbi Shrecha used to say, why let that person live in your head rent-free?
Beautiful.
Let me ask.
Please.
You've heard of the famous shyster called Bernie Madoff?
Yes.
But he swindled a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of people lost a lot of money, and they weren't able to retire or go on vacations and support themselves.
Non-profit organizations?
Also,
Yeah.
Also, the OU.
What about him?
No, like how do you can't like forgive someone like that.
It happens that I've spent. Okay. Oh, she'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay. At one point, I did business with Bernie Madoff, but okay, we'll talk about that when he comes back. But my only point being that 9 months go by and you've kind of forgotten about it, and now it's a week before Yom Kippur, and he comes over and he says, "Sorry, but that time, like back in, last November, we had a fight, and why are you dredging that up now? Like I'd forgotten about it, It can often be more painful to be reminded of it than to be the one reminding of it, right? So it's almost like a throwaway line here, right? And a person who doesn't forgive, he's a sinner. Take this very much to heart, Chabad. This is a huge lesson, right? It's very, very difficult to forgive. Because now this person who was living rent-free, I evicted him, right? And now he's breaking down the door to get back in. Right? I would just say, you're talking about Bernie Madoff, this happens to be an area that I have a little bit of expertise because I worked on Wall Street for 40 plus years, primarily in the role that's called a compliance officer. And in fact, one point, a firm that I helped to run, we did business with Bernie Madoff for a period of time. And I would just say that the majority of the so-called smart people, like I won't name names, but we know like people who ran, for example, the Yeshiva University endowment and other, very top investment professionals, Wall Street professionals, hedge fund managers, partners at Salomon Brothers, whatever. They all knew that he was doing something illegal, but they didn't realize what it was that he was doing. They knew, you want an explanation or should we go on?
Yeah.
Yeah, explanation? Show of hands?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the stock market, you have what's called bid, ask, and last price, right?
Yes.
I have this and I want to sell it. You don't have it, you want to buy it. I offer it for $1. You bid 90 cents. So it's bid 90 cents, offered $1. We make a deal, 95 cents. So last price is 95 cents. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay. Between the bid price and the ask price is 10 cent spread. Now, if I am a customer, you come to me, I'm the broker, and you say, I want to buy this bottle. And I'll say to you, well, it's bid at 90 cents and it's offered at $1. And you say, well, I'll pay $1 for it. I say, okay, but there's also commission. So I'm going to charge you $1.05. My 5 cents is my commission. You say, fine. Okay? So you got 90 cents. I got $1.05. You got the bottle. There's 15 cents in between. Where's it go? So in the open market, those prices just settle out. But if I can do a deal at a lower price, if what Bernie Madoff, what he started doing was he started what's called matching. So instead of doing a trade on the open market where everybody saw the prices,
Matching with people.
he would like, you had $1 for his 90 cents, he would give you 90 cents and charge you $1. And he would keep the 10 cents. Okay? So when he started doing it, that actually wasn't illegal. But it was illegal to do those type of transactions in the open market. In the open market, all of those spreads had to be disclosed. So that you couldn't, in other words, if I bought it from you for 90 cents, and if I bought it from you for 90 cents and I sold it to you for $1, you both had to know where that 10 cents went, that it went into my pocket. Right? I had to disclose to you, I'm buying it for 95, but I'm keeping 5 cents as a commission, and I had to disclose to you, I'm selling it to you for $1, and I'm keeping 5 cents as a commission. By the way, I'm not allowed to take the commission from both sides if I'm a trading house. Okay, so by matching, he was doubling, call it. He was keeping that entire spread. So what people, I'm convinced that because like I've been around the business for a long time, that the smart people who had their money with him, they were convinced that he was doing, because he became his business got gigantic. He was doing, I don't know percentages, but he was doing a substantial percentage of the trading business off the floor. So in other words, he would just match an order internally and then post the price on what you see, you see the tape where they have last prices, right? Mm-hmm. So he would buy from you for 90 and sell to you for $1, and he would post 95 cents or whatever price he wanted to post, right? So he could create price and he would pocket the difference. So all these people thought that that's what he was doing, that he was like matching these orders, taking the majority of the spread, posting the price, and that they figured they could just ride for free on his doing that. It turned out he wasn't even doing that. If he'd been doing that, he never would have gone to jail. I mean, he would have maybe been put out of business. Okay, fine. But all that money would not have disappeared. Instead, he just was doing a Ponzi scheme. He was just taking money. And after a while, people said, well, I got $20 million with you. I want to take half my money out of your hedge fund. So he'd say, okay, fine. Oh, you're going to invest $50 million with me? Great. Here's $50 million. Here's 10 for you. Go away. So for a guy who was so brilliant, he was monumentally stupid. But let's just say that his crime, the ripple effects of his crime were magnified by other people who believed that they were benefiting from crime. Only they weren't benefiting from the crime because he wasn't committing the crime that he thought they were committing, which would have been harder to find and would not have been so disruptive to the markets, and all that money would not have disappeared. So if you want to start talking about do you need to forgive, or how hard is it to forgive someone like Bernie Madoff, first of all, Rambam will say, if he does teshuva on his deathbed, God forgives him, it's not up to us.
It's already past that.
I only work here. I'm going to say, I don't know what he did on his deathbed, But the other part of it is, he was the tip of an iceberg of a very, very corrupt society, a very corrupt culture, which we still live in. So I think it's a lot easier to talk about, oh, you know what, I'm sorry I dented your car. I want to just finish up the parak, B'ezras Hashem, and then go back to ask some questions about Yom Kippur. So he's saying that if it is a person's Rav, you need to go back over and over and over and over and over again until the Rav forgives you. Now, he does not say, and if the Rav doesn't forgive you, hu achoteh. Interesting. But one would assume that al achad kama v'chama, a person's Rav should be, I would say on two levels. If a person is really a Rav, then he binds himself to the halacha and he says, listen, I'm obligated to forgive you. So, forgiveness is not necessarily a one-time act, just like teshuva is not a one-time act. So he says, as he quotes David HaMelech, right? He says, chatati negdi tamid, my sin is always in front of me, it's always before my eyes.
Does he mention a Rav or a teacher? Or is that the same?
No, he says, im haya rabo. Im haya rabo, if it was his Rav. So Rav, teacher, I don't know what the translation there says.
Teacher.
Okay, yeah, same, let's say, right. So I want to suggest that when David HaMelech says chatati nechdi tamid, and why the halacha is that we have to go back and say vidui for the same sins over and over again, is there are a few things going on here. One thing is that the same propensities that led us to that sin before, who am I to say that I no longer have those propensities, right? I am not, Chazal tell us that David HaMelech, perfected himself and slew his own Yetzer Hara. I'm not on that level. So, I understand the halacha says that I have to do vidui, and, I think about it, I really feel bad that I ate that slice of pizza, or that I yelled at my wife, or whatever it is. All of the, the little slip-ups that I am anyway, that we're subject to in the course of a day, right, in the course of our lives, right? And which is also why, by the way, there's this very beautiful, I mentioned it before, back in July, is a very beautiful, actually it's a Chabad minhag, which I took on many years ago, which is in the last, from Chai Elul, from Yud Chet Elul. It's 12 days until Rosh Hashanah. And so there's a custom to each day go back and look at 1 month of the previous year. And to do like cheshbon hanefesh, think about, the things that, the good things, the not so good things, the things that we did, things that we didn't do, things that we missed, the things that, et cetera, et cetera. And I tried to do that one year, and then I realized that it's hard to do that if you don't remember what you did. So I went back to keeping a journal, and trying at the end of each month to to go do a look back and do a cheshbon hanefesh for the month. And if you go back, if you keep, see 1 second.
Amen.
If we try to keep track of our behavior and our thoughts and so on, and then we go back and look at it, we see certain themes emerge. It's like, I can't believe I did that again. I can't believe I did that again, etc., etc. Okay? So David HaMelech is saying, you did Teshuvah. You did this once before. You did Teshuvah. It doesn't mean that the Teshuvah was not genuine and that it didn't take, that you didn't get, accepted in Shamayim at the time. Right? But just like I did genuine Teshuvah at that time, let me remember the process whereby I was able to do the Teshuvah then, because I need to revisit that process now. Because I see I still have the same tendency, I see I still did the same behavior, I see I have the same tendency and it's leading me to similar behavior, I recognize the same tendency in other behaviors. So we need to keep on revisiting from that perspective. And in areas where we were successful, it's good to say, hey, you know what? I knew what I was doing. I succeeded at it. Baruch Hashem, I was able to. And so, just like I was able to overcome my impulses at that time, I learned from a bad situation I got myself into, and I overcame those impulses. And now I see the mechanism at work in myself, and now I can apply the same principles and the same consciousness, the same awareness to overcome my impulses today. And of course, also, when we read the Tehillim as part of the Tefillah, or separately, many people just read Tehillim every day, right? It's not it's not like an incantation. It's not a magic formula. It's not we read it and God says, "Bing, you're great," right? But what we're doing is we are connecting our own neshama and our own kavanah to the neshama and the kavanah of David HaMelech, and we are modeling ourselves on David HaMelech in his passion and his desperation to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
It's like you were saying before, when a person sins and doesn't get a reaction from Hashem. Also, when he does tshuva, he doesn't get any reaction, right? But down the line, Hashem is making a heshbon.
Well, yeah, and what we're talking
in either case.
Yes, and what we say is that when we read the Tehillim, we're encouraging ourselves to rise to that level and try to embody the Bechinat David HaMelech, the qualities of David HaMelech. But we're also trying to remind God of, this great relationship that you had with a very imperfect human being, a person who made a lot of mistakes, right? And yet, look at the amazing relationship you had. And part of the reason was because David was able to say, Hatati negdi tamid. I always am aware of my sins. So the last two halachot here. Number 10. Yud. Asur adam lihyot achzari v'lo yipayes. You're prohibited to be a tough guy and not to forgive somebody. But you should be easy to appease and slow to anger. ובשעה שמבקש ממנו החוטא למחול, מוחל בלב שלם ובנפש חפצה. When a person comes and asks you for forgiveness, you should forgive them wholeheartedly and with great enthusiasm, with great acceptance. ואפילו חצה לו וחטא לו הרבה. Even if a person gave you a lot of trouble and sinned against you a lot, לא יקום ולא ייטור. You shouldn't get up in their face, and you should not hold a grudge against them. וזהו דרכה של זרע ישראל וליבם הנכון. This is the way of the Jewish people with the good heart. Yes, sir?
It says in the Torah that like Ein Tachat Ein, Regel Tachat Regel, that that's not like between the Jews and the Goyim, it's between the Jews and the Jews. It's like something connected to it. But how does it connect to this? If you're kind of up to live in some way to revenge.
No, very, very good point. I would say two things I would answer to that off the top of my head. And that's, so one thing is that that's a societal law. Those are societal halachas, or dinim. That where a person causes a damage, society, in order to assert its role as being in charge of human behavior within the society, and in order to create justice within the society, there has to be, let's call it a just punishment, right? So we say in English, let the punishment fit the crime. And the question in legal systems, one of the basic questions is the way society deals with a crime, is it punishment, or is it making things right again? And it could be both.
Or prevention.
Or prevention, right. Is it, so from the punishment perspective, is it prevention, right? That's like I think a second order of what I'm talking about, right? So the first order is, if a person steals something, then give it back. And you know, when Chazal, when they read that whole passage of Ein Tachat Ein, Shen Tachat Shen, etc., they said, well, it's in this whole long passage of monetary compensation for loss. So obviously, it doesn't mean that if, God forbid, somebody knocked out somebody else's eye, that they should have their eye put out.
But that would be just.
That's also in the Torah, an eye for an eye.
No, but it says an eye for an eye, and Chazal said, right, of course, it means that you have to, you determine the monetary value of the damage, right?
But if somebody has their the money, somebody has
We're all listening. Please.
I'm saying he says like if somebody has their eye ruined and that other person continues, have a healthy life, it's not just, right? It's and the money will not compensate the loss. So what it says in the Torah is actually it's really just, like eye for eye. It's really just.
Chazal don't think so. Chazal argue with it. Chazal say that, I can't remember who said it, maybe it's attributed, I think, like to Gandhi, an eye for an eye, and pretty soon everybody's blind, right?
But then the person who did the wrong will get away with it, and the person...
No, they don't get away with it. The way that Chazal, the way that the halacha is established is, and it's the way that Chazal read this as the pshat of the Torah. The Chazal says that the Torah, when it says Ein Tachat Ein, it does not literally mean take somebody's eye out. It means that if there is a damage from which you clearly cannot recover. God forbid somebody has somebody loses a limb or loses an eye or whatever, or loses a part of their body that makes them obviously not able to do what they were able to do before, or to live their life and enjoy their life the way they were able to before. Society can deal with that in one of two ways. It can deal with that in a cruel and unproductive way by putting out the other person's eye, or chopping off their arm, or killing their family, or blowing up their house, or whatever. Or it can deal with it in a way that enables society to move forward. Yes, God forbid this person no longer has the use of their eye. So first of all, there is a simple monetary calculation that society has to do. Like a person with only one eye, what kind of job can they not have? This person was trained to be pick something. Race car driver. An airline pilot. Okay, as an airline pilot, you were going to earn $180,000 a year. Right? Now with only one eye, you can no longer fly. That's a perfect example. Thank you. Right? Now you can only earn $70,000 a year. Well, you, the person who made that person lose their eye, you have to pay them the difference.
But the person who will pay the difference will still enjoy kind of good quality life.
That's the way society has to work, though. Chazal have decided that this is the society that the Torah wants the way that the Torah wants us to run society. That we're going to make them pay the difference in this person's income, and also we're going to poke their eye out.
That's the way insurance is set up for certain types of body damage.
For example, right? Society, yes, within a if you have a gang, like, two gangs are fighting with each other, right? So one member of one gang, chops the ear off of a member of the other gang. So then what are they going to do? They're going to go back and they're going to cut his ear off, and that'll teach him, right? Society, a society can't work that way. There will be what we all recognize are eternally remaining injustices. No society can put back Reuven's eye if Shimon knocked it out. But the society does not benefit from poking Shimon's eye out.
Reuven will benefit from it.
No, but he can't get his eye back.
Yes.
Shimon knocked out Reuven's eye.
So there will be like a balance.
No, there won't be a balance. But there won't be a balance. But there won't be a balance, because you're saying you're going to damage society in one way, and then you're going to perfect that by damaging it again. Societies can't work that way. That's what the Torah is teaching us.
The people who do the damage, they know they will be able to get away with the monetary compensation, so they will continue to do that damage. That he will knock somebody else's eye out and pay it off.
Maybe we'll teach him a lesson.
That's why we have police forces and stuff. Excuse me. Yes, please.
There is in the American law, anyway, that I'm familiar with, a concept of penal damages. If you purposely do something, then you not only are punished by compensating for the loss that the person had, but you are punished by additional monies that you're required to pay, and it's
or by going to prison.
By going to prison, yeah.
Right? Which is a good way to prevent somebody from knocking other people's eyes out, right? Please.
It's interesting that the American society goes to great lengths to determine the correct amount. It happened that I had a friend who became a PhD economist, and he had a subspecialty in this, determining
damages,
replacement income, and he made a second living testifying.
Yeah.
And he told me he didn't even do the work. His wife had all the formulas. She did the work, and he testified. But it was by formula, which is the way you want this kind of thing to be done.
Which is the way that
not by
society cannot create perfect outcomes. So it has to create optimal outcomes. And optimal outcomes means that necessarily there will be people who will not be fully compensated or fully made whole or fully happy with what they get.
Some people will get too much.
But right. So let's just finish this up, please, and then we have a minute or two left, right? Of the Kochavim, and by the way, this is what Rambam is bringing right here. He's saying, that we have to be forgiving. And he says it's the nature of the Jew to be forgiving, as opposed to of the Kochavim, ad lelev, enam ken. But they hold a grudge forever. Somebody does damage to them, somebody injures them, they're gonna get revenge on them. They hold it against them forever. If you remember the story of the Giv'onim, that they insisted on having people put to death because they had killed previous generations, okay? So this is exactly a response to your point. I'm not saying that your point is not valid. I think your point is very valid. And society says, well, we can't fix a permanent damage. Somebody lost an eye, it can't be replaced.
Is a person allowed to revenge the person who suffered the damage and their revenge?
The simple answer is no. There's the Goel Hadam in the case of murder.
Yeah.
But murder is different. We're not at that point yet. Let's just finish that. A person who did a sin or did some kind of damage to another person, and then that other person dies before you get a chance to ask them mechila. מביא 10 בני אדם ומעמידם על קברו, ואומר בפניהם, you bring a minion to the graveside, and you say in front of all these people, חטאתי להשם אלוקי ישראל, ולפלוני זה, שכך וכך עשיתי לו. I sinned against God and against this individual, because I did this certain thing.
That's what the Haredi did when Rabbi Shlomo Carmack died. They were always accusing him of being not proper with women. But after he died, thousands of them went to the graveside to ask for forgiveness.
No, we can talk about that separately. Shlomo Carlebach was very much not appropriate with women. It's too bad. אם היה חייב לו ממון, יחזירו לירושים, ולא היה יודע הירושים, יניחנו בבית דין ותתוודע. So, and if a person owes money to Ploni who is no longer alive, then they should give them to the descendants, or if the descendants are not around, they give them to Beit Din, and Beit Din will adjudicate it. So I just want to say that, first of all, this very last halakha, a person dies, and by the way, it's a very important and very beautiful custom, Shabbat Tov, that at the graveside, many people do this. Will, of a close family member or a close friend, many people will ask forgiveness at the graveside, because even if I can't think of anything that I did wrong, there's always something, right? And it's good to unburden ourselves of it, and good to give the met, that kavod, to give the person who's no longer in this world, give them the honor on their way out of acknowledging that there may be unfinished business. But it's fascinating to me that this halacha says explicitly that when you go to do this vidui at the graveside, or to ask mechila at the graveside, you say, what? Chatati l'shem Elokei Yisrael ve'leploni. Because every sin that's ben adam l'chavero has a very fundamental aspect of ben adam l'makom. That every interaction between human beings is also an interaction between each one of us and God, which I think goes back to the discussion that we were having before about, like, why would the society not want me to seek revenge? Because God wants the society to function properly. And human beings are not perfect, and the world is never going to be perfect. And so in a certain sense, it's like seeking revenge is like saying, I'm going to make the world perfect. And we can't do that. We're not capable of making the world perfect.
It also can have a deterrent effect as well.
Excuse me?
It can have a deterrent effect.
But that's the job of society, not of the individual. It's not the job of the individual to go poke somebody else's eye out. Society can't function that way.
The person who did the original damage, they actually abuse it very much, because they say, no, I'll get away with it, nothing will happen to me.
Something, an awful lot of these damages happen not on purpose. Very few people wake up in the morning, and Reuven does not wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to get Shimon on the corner and I'm going to poke his eye out. Reuven may wake up in the morning and say, I'm really angry at Shimon. And when I see him, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind.
But people who plan it and do it on purpose, they will get away with it.
No, people who do it on purpose, society puts them in prison. That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay, it doesn't always work that way. That's why there are people like Bernie Madoff running around, because there were multiple attempts to unmask what he was doing, and society chose to look the other way. Right? So yeah, criminals can get away with crime. Don't ever believe when people tell you crime doesn't pay. Crime pays big, which is why there are a lot of criminals. Okay. I just want to leave us with one quick thought. Just finishing up, Rabbi. I want to leave us with one quick thought and one question. Yom Kippur. It's the end of the year, right? It's the end. It's like Untitled Chapter, and we're closing the gates at Ne'ilah. But isn't the year already over? We had Rosh Hashanah a week and a half before. Rosh Hashanah means that the year was finished. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the new year. And at the beginning of the new year, a week and a half after the beginning of the new year, we're still clapping al chet for the sins for the previous year, which Rosh Hashanah, which is also Yom Hadin. So how does that work? And it's not, I mean, there's not a simple answer to this, but I think it's something that we need to think about. Please.
Yeah,